Welcome to Aspects of Writing. I'm your host, James Kelly, and my co-host is Janet Coursey. Our guest panelist for today's show is Dr. Carmen Smith, author of The I Am I Solution, and our guest is best-selling author John David Mann. The topic of today's show is the many ways to reach your audience. But before we get to our guest, my panel and I would like to read a few fun quips or quotes, and Jan, I'm going to let you start.
I'd love to. If you think advertising doesn't work, consider the millions of Americans that now think yogurt tastes good. John Whitley.
Oh, that's true. Carmen?
And what is the difference between unethical and ethical advertising? Well, unethical advertising uses falsehoods to deceive the public, while ethical advertising uses truth to deceive the public. And that was Wilheimer Stephenson.
All right. And John?
I've had a disturbing dream in which I break through a cave wall near Nakamati and discover urns full of ancient Coptic scrolls. As I unfurl the first scroll, a subscription card to some Gnostic exercise magazine flutters out of them. I don't know who wrote that.
That was Colin McEnroe.
Oh, Colin McEnroe, of course.
Yeah. And mine is, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is, I don't know which half. And that was John Wanamaker. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Aspects of Writing. Our guest is John David Mann, and the topic of today's show is the many ways to reach your audience. But first, I'd like to introduce our panelist, Dr. Carmen Smith. Dr. Smith, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I spent 22 years working with trauma and abuse and neglected children here in Clark County, Nevada. I'm a trauma specialist and happened to be here when we had the mass shooting here. I'm also a critical incident stress management coordinator for the county. And so when that happened, I had been retired. So I was not in the mix down in the convention center where my coworkers were. I had retired, but I did go to the memorial, and I was there to comfort people just as a regular citizen. And so that is my training. But I've written a book called The I Am Solution that talks about trauma, how to recover from trauma, and also talks about the behaviors that happen when you've had trauma in your life. And so there's a spiritual component to the I Am Solution. And so I'm really proud of that.
Yes, and you should be.
Yes.
Well, our guest is John David Mann, and he is an award-winning author whose writings have earned the Nautilus Award and the Axiom Business Book Award Gold Medal, Taiwan's Gold Book Award for Innovation, and the 2017 Living Now Book Awards, the Evergreen Medal, for contribution to positive global change. His books are published in more than 24 languages and have sold more than 2 million copies. He is co-author of the international bestseller The Go-Giver with Bob Berg and the New York Times bestseller The Red Circle with Brandon Webb and Flash Forsyth with Daniel Burrus, and the national bestsellers The Slight Edge with Jeff Olson, Among Heroes with Brandon Webb, and Real Leadership with John Addison. Take the Lead with Betsy Myers was named Best Leadership Book of 2011 by The Washington Post.
Wow. John has been creating careers since he was a teenager. At age 17, he and a few friends started their own high school in Orange, New Jersey, called Changes Incorp. Before turning to business and journalism, he forged a successful career as a concert cellist and prize-winning composer. At 15, he was the recipient of the 1969 BMI Award to student composers and several New Jersey state grants for composition. His musical compositions were performed throughout the United States, and his musical score, Prometheus Bound, written at age 13, was performed at the amphitheater in Delphi, Greece, where the play was originally premiered.
Wow.
Wow,
That's
I'm
pretty
so
impressive.
impressed.
That is
So actually, I'm
awesome.
impressed with the idea that you started a school, a high school.
Yeah.
You know, where did that come from?
You know, I'm listening to this biography, and I feel like Tom Sawyer hearing his own eulogy. I'm listening to that, and I sound like Tim Ferriss or something, like some kind of superhuman that does all the, and like, Tim Ferriss is like a master fencer and a master cook and a master martial artist and a master this and chess player.
Yeah.
Guy is just sounding like it's like some kind of a freak on steroids. And to me, this was just all normal. I don't know. It didn't feel particularly freakish or steroidal. But so where did the school come from?
Yeah.
I was 17 years old, and a bunch of friends and I were sitting around one day and kind of mildly complaining about our various high schools. A few of us had gone to the same grade school, which was a little private school, and sort of the opposite of what you think of as an upper crust hoity-toity private school. It was a very arts-oriented, kind of funky private school.
Okay.
And we'd all gone our separate ways to various public schools. And we were all kind of bored out of our minds. And we were talking one Sunday, like, what would it be like if we had our own school? And we just started fantasizing about that. And a few of us, me in particular, had parents who, instead of saying, hearing our talk, instead of saying, oh, don't be ridiculous, said things like, you should keep talking about that, and just encouraged us. And
Wow.
And so, yeah. So we did, and we spent the rest of that year, probably another 6 months or so, sort of in the planning and idea process. We eventually decided that we needed to hire a grown-up to be our director.
Yeah.
And so we interviewed several candidates. We offered the at that time, astonishing salary of, this is translating back to 1971 dollars, nothing.
Okay.
And hired an amazing gentleman who was actually ended up being a novelist, a YA novelist particularly, and a very, very accomplished man who is still alive today, just turned 90, Julian F. Thompson, who wrote The Grounding of Group 6. Anyway, he became our director. And the next year, we were in operation. I attended there as a student, graduated. I went back and joined the faculty and taught there for a year, and then moved on with the rest of my life in the school. Went on for another 10 years and had a pretty good run.
Well, Carmen's going to finish the rest
Wow.
of your accomplishments.
This is your life show.
Yeah,
Oh
this
my
is your
God,
life.
there's more.
There is
Yes.
more.
So your
This guy's not
diverse,
tired yet.
right? Your diverse career has made you a thought leader in several different industries. In 1986, John founded and wrote for Solstice, a journal on health, nutrition, and environmental issues. His series on the climate crisis, and yes, he was writing about that back in the 80s,
Yeah.
was selected for the national reprint in Utne Reader. In 1992, John edited and produced the underground bestseller, The Greatest Networker in the World, by John Milton Fogg, which became the defining book in its field. During the 1990s, John built a multi-million-dollar sales distribution organization of over 100,000 people. He was co-founder and senior editor of the legendary journal Upline and editor-in-chief of Networking Times.
All right.
Wow.
Well, and John, you are married to Anna Gabriel Mann, and you consider yourself the luckiest man in the world.
True.
You can
Yes.
visit, and you can visit his website at www.johndavidmann.com, and that's JohnDavidMann.com. And what else can you tell us about yourself that we left out?
Well, I'm very proud, as you mentioned, that I've been a thought leader in various industries, and what that means is that I thought I was a leader.
Okay.
Uh-huh. Sounds like you must have been.
A leader in his own mind.
Yeah.
What else can I add to that? Well, because as I said, I'm exhausted by that. What I'll add to that is my first love was music. My father is a choral conductor who grew up in Germany and studied conducting under a teacher who was sort of the I think 14th generation cantor and in Leipzig in the Bach lineage. I mean, he grew up straight out of this Bach and Handel lineage, and that was the soil I grew up in. So playing the cello and composing was really, and classical music was my not only my life, but it was my bloodstream. Yeah. And I've gone through all these permutations, and it isn't that I really sought out all these careers. I just kept having interests, and opportunities arose, and things led one direction and another. I never planned to be an author. I never planned to be a business person. Those things just seem to keep happening. But I still sort of, I'm still a musician on the inside. And so my approach to writing, in a lot of ways, my approach to writing is very much informed by my years as a composer and a concert musician, and as an appreciator and lover of classical music and the form and structure and beautiful intricacies of great classical music. So yeah, I love cooking with my wife. I love taking walks with my wife, and it took me 50 years to figure out how this marriage thing works. We finally got it. And,
how many years?
Well, 50 years. I mean, I was married twice before, so I'm on my third marriage. And when you ever hear the expression "third time's a charm," I can vouch for that. It's true. So I have to say I'm honestly pretty happy with my life. And I don't know if that was always true. I think I was searching for decades and being furiously busy. But I'm honestly pretty pleased and pretty content and pretty happy with what I do now. I love writing these little parable-like stories, The Go-Giver and so forth. And so I'm sure we'll get to that. But that's all.
Life's a journey, so sometimes it takes that journey to find out what happiness is.
That's right.
Hey, 50 years of practice, and then it's like, okay, we're good.
Yeah. Okay. So you wrote or co-wrote 26 books. You have a variety of co-authors. How did they come your way?
In a variety of ways. Many of them have come, or I'll say it this way, maybe half of them have come through my agent. I have a literary agent, but the other half have come through various associations, and it starts with Bob Berg. I like to say that Bob Berg ruined my career. So I should probably start there. I was in 2004, I've been doing a lot of, I'd gone from business to doing a lot of writing in business and a lot of sort of business journalism. And when I say business journalism, what that really was a lot of writing about sort of leadership and team building and sort of the human development side of business, more than about economics or business structures or any of that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And one of the guys whose articles I'd edited a bunch was Bob Berg, who was started out as a sales guy and became a sales leader and is pretty well known in that field. And in 2004, I was all set to go to Hollywood. That was my plan. I was going to be a screenwriter. I was working on a screenplay on the life of the Apostle Paul. I was studying with a great screenwriting teacher in Hollywood, a man named Hal Crosman, who I still credit today.
Oh, I know Hal Crosman.
Are you serious? You know Hal?
I've taken some of his classes.
Have you really?
Yes.
Is he magnificent or what? I love that guy.
Yeah.
And his classes are so excellent. So I had just come off a string of Hal's classes when The Go-Giver happened. And here's how it happened. I was writing. I was doing Hal stuff. And Bob Berg came along and said, listen, I want to write this book. I got this idea for a book, but I can't really write it. It's not the kind of writing I do. I need you to write it with me. It's sort of write it with/for me. And he said, I'll make a deal. You do the writing. I will market the book. And Bob is masterful at marketing. And so we wrote this. I was not excited. I had no time for this. I wanted to be a screenwriter. But I love Bob. He's a great guy, good friend. So took a look at it. He had already sketched out a bunch of stuff. And I played with it, and I got into it quickly and loved it. At the time, I honestly didn't really know any parables. I mean, I knew a few, but I had never read, let's say, The Alchemist or The Richest Man in Babylon or Life of Pi, or any books that I now look at as the cream of that form. I didn't know any of them. I knew The 1 Minute Manager, and that's kind of it. But I loved this idea, so I jumped in. 6 weeks later, we had a manuscript through a very circuitous story, which I won't get into because it takes too long, but it ended up one of those things that looks like, air quotes, coincidence. Mm-hmm. The agent who sold The 1 Minute Manager ended up being our agent.
Oh.
And it's funny because when Bob and I first wrote the manuscript, we made up a mock cover which just purely, I mean, we had no agent, we had no publishers, we had no connection to New York, we had no anything. So this is purely fantasy. I made up this cover, and it said The Go-Giver, Bob Berg, John David Mann, 5 Laws to Success, and blah, 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 whatever it was. And it's at the bottom, a forward by Spencer Johnson, MD. Spencer Johnson, for your listeners, is the co-author, along with Ken Blanchard, of The 1 Minute Manager, which was an enormously successful parable and still is today. And so we ended up, our second Go-Giver book had a blurb on the cover by Spencer Johnson. Just goes to show you the power of imagination. Mm. Anyhow, this agent took the book and sold it. It was rejected 22 times in New York. Mm. And the 23rd person was Adrian Zackheim at Portfolio Publishing. And it's 500,000 copies later. The Go-Giver is going strong.
We're going to talk about this in a few minutes, too, about how you did traditional publish all your books except for this last one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Well, you have such a wide range of interests in your writing. And explain to me how you come up with so many different genres and what else you might be doing.
Yeah, well, the different genres is kind of like the different careers. It wasn't my plan. Yeah. And at first, in the first few, certainly the first few books, first many books, I was writing pretty solidly in the business/leadership sphere. Books when you think of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or what was the great, I'm Tom Peters' In Search of Excellence. Books like that are about the principles that make great businesses great, or that make great business people great. That's the kind of book that I was involved in. And a lot of the topics were, owing to my co-authors. I mean, you mentioned The Slight Edge. Well, that was a book with Jeff Olson. This is the speech that Jeff Olson gives, the training he gives. It's based on Jim Rohn stuff, and he's a writer. So in a lot of books, I've functioned as your classic ghostwriter, as in my book might be in the title page, but it's that guy's material that I write with him. Not all the books, but some of the books.
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm just curious because we had a gentleman on our show named Gerard D. Marigny, and he writes in so many different genres, but he does it because, in his case, someone will come to him and they'll say, would you like to work on this Western? Because he does scripts as well. Would you like to work on this Western, or would you like to work on this science fiction? And he's learned not to say no. Because he said, I like to open myself up to different genres and find out if I might like it. Because
it's a lot like that for me.
And even though he didn't write in it originally, it was something that he found interesting.
You mentioned Betsy Myers and that book, Take the Lead. So here's a person. This is when Obama had just been elected, and she was the COO of his campaign. And she had also functioned in the Clinton White House. So she was very, if you remember Dee Dee Myers, who was Bill Clinton's press secretary, this is Dee Dee Myers' sister, Betsy Myers. Uh-huh. So she was very high up in the whole Democratic establishment. So I was tapped to write her book, Take the Lead, this book about leadership. And she had big Democratic friends and big Republican friends. It's a very across the aisles book, beautiful book. I love working on it. I was in the middle of a meeting with Betsy in Boston on that book when I got a call from my agent saying, "You're probably not interested in this. This is not what you do. But I just thought I'd give you a call." She had been. It was when Captain Phillips had just been rescued from the Maersk, Alabama by 3 Navy SEAL snipers who had fired 3 coordinated shots and killed 3 Somalian pirates. Everybody knows that story, right?
Yeah.
April 2009. And she had been watching TV, watching CNN. They had a show on TV with a guy who trained Navy SEAL snipers. And she turned to her sister and said, "I want that guy as a client." Well, 3 days later, that guy walked into her office and said, "I need an agent."
Wow.
That guy was Brandon Webb, the guy who trained the Navy SEAL snipers. And she was calling me to say, "I got this Navy SEAL sniper who's got his amazing memoir. He needs a really good writer. I know you don't do this." And I said, "I do now."
Yeah. Yeah.
Very nice.
So Brandon and I have written 5 books now together.
See, I don't like to pigeonhole myself. I write in all different genres: children's books, dramas, science fiction.
Fantastic. Yes.
And I enjoy that. And I'm like you too. I like to write in different aspects of the industry, not just novels, but scripts. I think you really, if you are a true writer, I think you're just going to write just to write.
Right.
Yes. Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, and I think that, a lot of people gravitate. I mean, we all naturally gravitate to what we gravitate to. I gravitate to my favorite foods, but I like to eat a lot of different kind of foods. Well, I have really gravitated to this parable form. I love this. But I also just published earlier this year, the longest damn thing I ever wrote is like a 400-page novel about 4 special operations snipers. So, yeah, I think it's good to be able to, just as you say, to write in many different genres, many different styles, and different forms, and long, short, fiction, nonfiction. I haven't got a produced screenplay yet, but the day is young.
I have a question for you about the cover of that book, the new book.
Yes.
I noticed that there are no caps. Whose idea was that, and why?
That was me.
Was it?
Yeah.
What's I got to understand the psyche behind that, because I have an author that I represent. She's published under my label, and her name, she only uses small. She doesn't use caps for her. She writes under the name S.H. Montgomery, but it's small S, small H, small M. And a lot of people say, why does she do that? But that's just what she wanted. And I'm just curious, what is the psyche behind that? What was your reasoning?
I don't know if I can give you accurate reasoning, but I can tell you the evolution of it.
Okay. All
So this is a book, and it's fun because at home I have a series of bound paperbacks that are iterations of that cover. There were other cover designs. The one you have, this is the one that's published, is the one that's got the kind of orange, gauzy background that looks like a watercolor with this watercolor painting in the front, and these bold italic type that's all lowercase. It wasn't at first. It was a more traditional title with the upper lowercase, traditional title case. And it just didn't look right. Yeah. It just didn't feel right. And I was looking for, it's funny because I'm not a designer by profession. I've never been a designer by profession, but I've sort of been one. I've done a lot of designing. I designed, business newsletters and magazine covers and things. And I've designed a bunch of books. So I had PageMaker, which today is InDesign. It was originally called PageMaker. Was one of the first pieces of software in the whole desktop revolution back in the 80s. I had version 1.2 of PageMaker in my first Mac, which had a 20 megabyte hard drive. Yeah. So I've been using this design stuff for ages. My first stuff I'd laid out was actually cut and paste with actual knife and rubber cement.
Yeah.
So I'm really familiar with layout and design, but I'm not a trained artist. So I often don't know what to do, but I know what's working and what's not working.
Well, we have to also mention the name of the book, which is The Recipe.
Yes. And The Recipe is a story which has at its center a 14-year-old boy. And 14 is a funny age because it's kind of like, particularly for Owen, I mean, this is probably a better description of 11 than a 14, but you're perched between childhood and adulthood. Owen is becoming a man, but he's also a boy. It's not written for a young adult audience. It's not meant to be pegged in that buttonhole. But that's who it is. That's who the hero of the story is. And I think the lowercase felt like Owen. I don't know why.
Okay.
When I tried doing it all in lowercase,
in a way.
Yeah, it felt. I was trying to figure out how to convey. I didn't want the book. It's called The Recipe, and it's not a cookbook, right? And so I wanted to convey that it was about food because there's a lot of food in the book, but I also wanted to convey that it was a story, that it wasn't a cookbook. And I wanted to. So I was trying to convey a lot, and it seemed like the picture of the pancakes and the lowercase just felt right. That's kind of the best I can do, I guess.
Okay. Well, I just need to let our listeners know you're listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly. My co-host is Janet Corsi, and our panelist for today is Dr. Carmen Smith, and our guest is author John David Mann. The topic of the show today is the many ways to reach your audience, and we're about to get into the group discussion. And John, I'm going to ask you, most of your work was published through a traditional publisher, but this book you just came out with, well, first of all, this book you just came out with was self-published. And there's two unique things here. One, you always use traditional publishers. This one's self-published with your partner on the book. And then you also never did book signings until yesterday. So which one would you like to talk about first?
Let's save the book signing and make that the dessert.
Okay.
So yeah, the self-publishing. I mean, there's an overt reason and a covert reason. The overt reason is that the publishers all said no.
Okay.
And this is funny because
even though
going
you had
back,
all the other novels published, they still said
exactly. Exactly. I mean, a bunch of New York Times bestsellers, 24 books or so, 2 million copies, everything you read, that's all. They know all that. That's all there. It's all real. Yet, so to just to little bit of background, going back over a decade, when we first took The Go-Giver to New York, my agent took it to publishers. The first dozen or so publishers said, nah, no. They said, I like it, but I don't know about the ending, or I like it, but I don't know about the middle, or I like it, but I'm not sure it's really for us, or I like it, but I don't know, we're already crowded and I'll probably regret it, but nah. Nobody jumped on it. And I have to say, today, I am so grateful they didn't.
You want me to tell you something interesting about what you're talking about is we've had so many authors on this show, John, who have been traditionally published, and almost every single one that has been traditionally published comes on the show, says their last work was self-published for much the same reason you're saying.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting. Well, with The Go-Giver, I was so glad I said no because it wasn't ready. And we took it back and we did an enormous amount of revision. It was very young in my book career, and so I know I'm a lot familiar with revision now than I was then. But it really needed to be said no to. And we revised it like crazy, took it back to New York, and we got a dozen more no's. And then eventually we got the right yes. With the recipe now, flash forward, 10 or 14 years later, with the recipe, we got the first 24 no's, and I thought, okay, this is good. We're just warming up. We're waiting for the right one. And then we got another 12 no's. And, some of the editors that I knew well, and I knew they loved my work, and they came back and said, I love this book. This book is fantastic. I love the characters. The life lessons are so poignant. The food is so tender. I'm a foodie. I love the food in there. I wish I could do this, but it just doesn't fit our category.
Yeah.
And in fact, they couldn't really kind of figure out what category it did fit. They were saying I don't think there is no coming of age culinary parable category.
Right.
You've invented a new genre.
Yeah. And what they were really saying, and not to demean them, because what they were really saying was, we don't know what readership you're aiming at, and that's a legitimate complaint. Because if you don't, I've heard this conversation so often. They'll say, publisher says to the author, "What's your readership? Who's this book for?" And the author says, "It's for everybody." Well, forget that.
Right.
If you approach a marketplace by saying, "Well, it's for everybody," then you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, it may be that it finds readers across the board, and that's what I hope is going to happen with the recipe. But I know who the recipe is for. The recipe is for people who love to read about personal development and personal growth, and when they watch the Food Network. They love food. That's what it's for.
So it is a crossover.
Well, it sounds like it is for everybody.
And my target reader is probably in his or her 40s or 50s. I say his because I was with a friend just now who fits this perfectly. He's like the perfect demographic. His or her 40s or 50s, could be older, could be younger, of course I know, but they've been through a bunch of careers. They're probably in some kind of entrepreneurial space. They love the Food Network. They cook a lot themselves, and there's about 100 million of them in America.
Yeah.
And I want them all to read this book. So the overt reason is that the publisher all said no, and so my co-author and I decided if we were going to get it out there, we had to do it ourselves. The covert reason is that for years I'd kind of wondered, what would it be like to try to do this? Like, that would be a cool challenge. So this is also kind of an excuse to do a full audiobook myself.
Okay.
To do a full marketing and promotional program myself, to do things that I've often said I would never do, to just go ahead and give it a try.
You also have done audiobooks, is that correct?
Bob Berg and I have read all the Go-Giver books. We've taken turns on chapter by chapter. So I've done that before. I've been in the studio. I had just never done a book start to finish all myself.
Now, I'm just curious because up until yesterday, you had not done book signings. But I am curious because you've had several co-authors. Did any of your co-authors do book signings?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you kind of like left that to them to do in the past.
Very much. And so this is my business model, or this has been my business model, is that almost all of my books are co-authorships in which the other person, the other author, is the one either with the platform, the one who promotes, the one who goes out on the road, the one who speaks, the one who gets out there and sells the book. And I stay home. I like to say Bob Burke keeps me chained up downstairs in the basement on a piece of newspaper
But
writing.
is that because you didn't feel comfortable going out there and do it? What was the reason that you decided to stand back?
I actually spent years doing public speaking when I was younger, and I've been on the road in the past. And so I'm not unfamiliar with speaking and being out front. I don't consider marketing my prime skill set. I mean, there are things that my mother used to say, if you're on a ship and it crashed at sea and you're floating among the debris and the top of a grand piano floats along and you grab it and it works, that's great. But that doesn't mean that life preservers ought to be made in the shape of piano tops. There are things that, boy, my mother has said some weird things. There are things
That makes sense.
There are things that I can do decently. It doesn't mean that I'm the best person to do them or it's the best use of my time or best thing I should be doing. Yeah. And I don't consider myself as really a great marketer, even though I have some familiarity with it, but I'm not great at it. I got a lot of friends who are a lot better at it than I am. And honestly, being on the road and marketing and doing a lot of it is tiring for me. It's just not my nature. So I'm much better off writing the books. That said, so Bob Burke, book signings, on the road, radio, TV. He's like such a masterful promoter, marketer, and he loves it being out there. Brandon Webb, same thing. He's now the CEO of a $100 million media business. This is what the guy does.
Yeah.
Me, I write books. Yesterday was the first time that I did a book signing and did a book reading, and it was a blast. We sold out the bookstore. I had a ball.
Fantastic.
That's good, yeah. It sounds like your mother watched the Titanic.
No, it's possible. It's possible.
Yeah. All right. So I want to know about your experience yesterday because this was your first book signing. And I know Jan's done book signings. Carmen, I know you have.
Yeah.
And
Barnes
I
Noble.
certainly have. So I want to know how you felt. How did that feel?
It's funny. It's funny. I'll tell you how I felt and also what I think about it because the last book signing was when the book Among Heroes came out. Brandon Webb, my co-author, did a book signing at the Barnes & Noble in Manhattan. He did book signings all over the country, but I was at that first one with him. I didn't sign books. I wasn't up front. I was in the back. This is all about Brandon. This is a military memoir. He's the Navy SEAL, not me. Uh-huh. So I was there. And it's funny because you think about if your goal is to sell like 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 books, and you're in this room spending your whole evening for, 50 people, 100 people, 150 people, it's tempting to say, like numerically, is this worth my time? I mean, it's only a handful of people.
Right.
And man, my answer is yes, it is so worth it. There is just nothing that takes the place of face-to-face contact.
And you know that from your book signing, people that bought your book are going to go out there and tell other people about you and that book. Because the experience isn't just the book anymore. The experience is the book and meeting you.
That's right. Exactly.
So that's why they can be very valuable. We have an author who's on our panel, actually, who sits in sometimes, and he doesn't do book signings either. He just doesn't feel comfortable doing them or just doesn't really want to do them. And that's okay if that's the way you can do it. If you have
I loved it.
Yeah. And I'm so glad to hear you did because I know when I spoke to you a few days ago, you had never done a book signing.
That's right. Yep.
So, yeah.
So perfect timing, huh? Yeah. And I'll tell you what I loved about it too. I loved sitting at the table with my co-author and people walking up one by one, and each one of them getting to look them in the eye and say, "Thank you so much for coming today. This is and just to talk with them, not about the book, not about me, just about them and why they came and how exciting this was. Yeah. We just had a ball meeting people. This is what my co-author Bob Burke does on social media constantly every day. And I do a lot of it on social media and by email. I make a good attempt, and a successful one, I think, often, to engage with a lot of readers online. I don't do as near as much as Bob does. He spends a lot of time on that. I spend a very little time, but I cherish that time, and I know it matters. It's amazing to me how often we see people online who say, I posted about their book, and the authors wrote to me. Like, that never happens.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it ought to happen all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you know it's kind of neat because people sometimes going into the store don't know you, but they still want to talk to you. Even if they don't buy your book, oftentimes people come by just to talk to you.
And they're curious. Yeah. I've noticed in self-publishing that we're kind of told up front that you're going to be a marketer. You're going to be out selling your books, that it's not just about writing it. You've got to promote it, push it, and all of that. So
You're the
I
business
kind of
person.
prepared myself for, okay, I'm going to be stepping out of my box big time, and I've got to be pushing, doing a lot of things that make me uncomfortable. So, yeah, I've been in that situation where it's like, I'm not a marketer, but, yeah, I'm going to have to be.
You really do have to put on a different hat.
Yeah.
Now, in your case, what is your next plan? Or do you have another book signing planned?
I will. First, I will just say this: I have attended a few book signings as a customer that had an enormous impact on my life. I went to a book reading with Dennis Lehane.
Okay.
Right when the first Tampa trilogy book came out. I went to a book signing with Kate Atkinson, who was my #1 favorite author of all time. In New York. It was eerie. It happened totally by happenstance. I was there for a meeting with my publisher, and her book had just come out. I had just gotten her book. I just said to my wife that morning, my God, I got to read Kate Atkinson's new book. It was my birthday, and I walked into this meeting with my publisher, and Kate Atkinson was sitting there signing books.
Wow.
And having a chance to talk to authors, even just for a minute about their writing process, has been enormous for me. You asked if I'm going to do more. I hope so. I hope to do one in Dallas in 2 weeks. Okay. We'll see. And so, yeah, if I have the opportunity, I will definitely do it again.
And you said you did a reading before the signing event?
Right in the middle of it, yeah. After
Okay.
about an hour and a half of signing, I read a passage. Yes.
And you were at Barnes & Noble?
No, it was actually an independent bookstore.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Yeah, because Barnes & Noble is not as open to letting people do readings as some of the independent stores. I'm glad to hear you went to an independent store to do the first
Yeah,
one.
man.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, I have a story
Love
about
those.
Barnes & Noble. They set up an area, and this is here
Yes.
in Las Vegas, and I did a lecture.
Wow.
Yeah,
I did a
Oh,
lecture.
far
out.
They just really were the sweetest people.
Was it the one in Henderson?
It was the one in Henderson.
Yeah.
They're golden.
Yeah, they are. That
golden.
store
They are
is really,
golden.
really,
Yeah.
they're really for the self-published author.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I tell the story a lot. When I started out here in Las Vegas, I had done some signings in Georgia. I lived in Atlanta when my first novel came out. And I went to California, did some independent stores. But when I ended up staying here in Las Vegas and didn't have my books in the store yet here, a friend of mine got it in the store. And it was out of Borders. You remember Border Books?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
oh, my.
I was invited. They put my book in the store. This was back in 1995, and they wanted me to do an event because I was unknown.
Mm-hmm.
That's how different the industry's changed,
Yes.
and they wanted me
Yes.
to do an event. And I was getting ready to do a signing, and Stephen J. Cannell was there doing a book signing. And Stephen J., he had the same PR person I did locally. And so she introduced me to him, and I was told him didn't know what to do, I guess, And so he said, offer some kind of lecture. Do something before you do the signing. And so I did one on self-publishing, because in 1995, very few people
Yeah,
were
that's
self-publishing.
Right.
Yes,
And
yes.
it took off, and I was at that store for a year and a half every month doing a lecture.
Wow.
Yeah, and I remember my first signing. I've told this as well. I had 77 people show up, and the store only accommodated so many seats because of the fire marshal laws. So they had
Yes.
Monica went around, the PR person, or not the PR person, the events coordinator, and asked people if they'd be willing to come back in the evening. She said, "James, can you do another one this evening? And I'll have half the people come back this evening." So
Wow.
that's how I got started in
Wow.
Vegas with
That's
my
nice.
first novel.
So I have a question for you, because I don't know the answer to this. Now, today, 20 years later,
Right.
In the world of Amazon, is that kind of thing far less likely to happen, or just as likely, or more likely to happen? Would that be more of a rarity today?
In what respect?
That a not that well author gives a book signing, and a lot of people come. I have this picture that book signings have been a diminishing breed, but I don't know if that's true or not.
I actually think it is possible. I'll tell you a couple things that I know for certain, because I dealt with Debbie, who was the events coordinator at the store that Carmen's talking about, and I've had her on my show to discuss this very topic. And one of the things is that she found usually a group discussion it doesn't work.
Right.
You have to have something that people are really interested in to bring you in a store. To just talk about your book or do a reading doesn't usually sell books. So, of course, self-publishing is something most people are interested in. And then Dr. Carmen's book is basically, it's a self-help book, spirituality.
Oh God, yes.
So, and yours,
Yeah.
it's kind of along the way. But anyway, so if it has a topic that people are really interested in, they probably would encourage you to do that. But if we're just the average author out there selling a dramatic piece or a science fiction piece, maybe not.
Yeah.
I happen to think they're making a mistake. I think that we talked about this a couple shows back where we have accomplished authors that they won't allow them to do that. And I think when you have an accomplished author who knows what it works for them, like you said, you went to an independent store, and if they've gone to independent stores and it worked, it should work just as easily in the bigger traditional stores like Barnes & Noble or
You'd think.
Maximilian. Or Books-A-Million, I mean. So the thing is that I think sometimes they make a mistake by not listening to the author. Because if you're already tried and true, then at least give it a try. But I will tell you this. Debbie told me once there was a guy who do you know that Grisham used to sell his books out of the back of his car?
I have read this,
Okay.
yes.
Well, this is true. This was just last year. Debbie had a guy who came by. He was from out of state. And he said, I would like to do a book signing. Well, nowadays, they're regulated. They're only allowed to do 2 commission signings a year. And the rest of them have to be authors sent to them through the store, through the chain. But she said, I'm going to go ahead and let you do this because he wanted to do it on a Wednesday. Usually they want the self-published authors on a Saturday because there's a bigger crowd.
Yes.
He came in, and within 2 hours, he had sold, I think, something like 60 books.
Wow.
Nobody knew who he was.
Wow.
Yeah.
He said, can I come back? And she said, yes. He came back, I think, on the Saturday because he went out of town to another place, then came back through Vegas, and he did more than that, I think, the second time. She said she'd never seen that happen before, and she doesn't know why it happened. It was a spirituality book. I can't remember the name of it. But the thing is, he wasn't known. He just had that gift for being able to go out there and capture people's attention.
That's so cool.
And I think that's the mistake some of the big stores make. They don't know who might be able to get or garner the attention to get. And I get it because I've had authors, I've helped put their books in the stores. And I see them sit there and sometimes sell 1 book, 2 books, 7 books. I get that. But you never know when that one person might pull it off. But the seasoned authors, the ones who are self-published, who've gone out there time after time and proven they can sell 20, 40, 50, 60 books, I think it behooves the store to let them do what they know works. Because keep in mind, when someone goes in to buy a book, oftentimes when they go into a store and they don't know who the author is, they're not there to buy your book. They're there to buy someone else's book.
Right.
But if you're an author and they can meet you, there's a time when you can sell it to them, even though they didn't know who you were.
Right.
And I'll give you an example. We had a lady who wrote a book. I always bring her up because I worked with her a lot. She wrote a book called Angels Never Die. It was a true story. And I would stand out front, and I was going to ask you if you do this as well, if you have bookmarks or not. But anyway, I had bookmarks. And I always, with all the authors, whenever they have an event that were my authors, I would go out front of the store. They all thought I worked for the store. And I would pass out their bookmarks to every person that walked in that store. And I remember one lady particularly, in fact, Debbie, the events coordinator, and I have talked about this, how that worked. This lady was in a hurry. She was going in to buy 3 specific books. When I stopped to give her the bookmark, oftentimes people say, I don't want it. She said, I said, well, you know what, just take it with you. Just read it later. Just take it with you. I always do that. She went in, got the 3 books she was going to buy. On her way out of the store, she walked by. She acted like she wasn't interested in me anymore. Walks to her car, gets in her car, and she sits there and reads that bookmark. She comes back to me and says, thank you so much for giving me this. I'm going to go buy this book right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
fantastic.
it's not just the author being there. It's the tools that you use as well to get them into the store or to buy your book. And keep in mind, if they have something tangible they can take with them, like a bookmark, if they didn't buy your book, you never know what they're going to do when they get home because they can go on Amazon. I always put the QR code on those so they can just, if they've got a smartphone and they're out eating and they haven't gone home yet, they can click on that QR code and read what that book's about. So those are techniques if you're going to start doing book signings.
This is great. I love it. I love that idea. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and take a chance on even crazy book signings. We had a book signing where I work at, and it was I work at a car dealership.
She works for Volvo.
I work for Volvo Cars of Las Vegas, and we had 15 fabulous local authors, and we sold tons of books.
Yeah.
Tons of
Wow.
books. It was amazing. We had a blast.
You know what? Do what's fun, and I think that's what Jen's getting at. We have authors who will go to restaurants. We have an author who will do. I forget which one was that. Diamore. Yeah, he does Diamore in the evening. He's Italian, and he has this book that he wrote. It's basically a true story, and they make a whole evening out of it at the restaurant.
Yeah.
And so everyone gets involved at the restaurant. I mean, you can really have fun with
Yes,
doing this.
you can.
And I think what you're talking about is probably why you didn't do book signings, because, you probably didn't realize there are other ways of doing it. You don't have to go to just a store.
Right.
And we just did a show that was on. In fact, if you go to aspectsofwriting.com, that show is on there now that you can listen to that played on Friday, and we interviewed someone who was at an event. And people utilize events. It was a spirituality event, and she wrote on 5D, and she goes there and does her lectures, and sells a ton of books,
Yeah.
and has fun at it. The thing
Yeah.
is that you got to have fun with what you're doing. If you're not
That's
having
right.
fun, I can see why some authors might not do it, because if you're intimidated by crowds, or
Yep.
you can't talk to someone.
Yep.
It can be very difficult. And I'm a shy
Absolutely.
person, so it's hard for me. But once I get into it, you can't stop me. But you know what I mean?
I do. I
Yeah.
do.
It's funny. He's shy when it comes to himself, but when I did my book signing at Barnes and Nobles, this man was marching up and down the aisle saying, "Hey, you get back over there and talk to that woman."
I actually go through the store. Listen, after I pass the stuff outside, I go through the store and say, "Did you see
you meet the author?
up front?"
Wow.
I love it. I love it.
You got to talk to her.
Well, so
You
I tried a new technique yesterday, and I wonder if you think this is a good idea.
Okay.
So one person that came at one point, I was standing around. We were doing some milling about, and there was a person standing there, and I introduced myself, and I pointed at the bookshelf where I happened to spy a paperback copy of All the Light We Cannot See, Anthony Doerr.
Okay.
And I said, "Oh, that book is so phenomenal." And I started telling her all about that book, about the young French girl and the young German boy. And you have no idea how the paths are going to cross. Let's kind of tell the story of the whole book and say, "That's an amazing novel. You can't put it down." And so an hour later, we're signing books, and she comes up, and she had a copy of my book, and she had the paperback of All the Light We Cannot See. And she put my book down to sign, and I signed it, and I pointed to Anthony Doerr, and I said, I wish I could sign that book too. I wish I were him. I wish I'd written that book. I'm so sorry I can't sign both your books." And she laughed, and I laughed, and she talked to the other author, and he signed it, and then she came back to me, and I said, "Once again, I'm really, really sorry that I am not Anthony Doerr." And she said, "Okay, after all this, you got to sign this one too." So she plopped down the Anthony Doerr book. Said, "You got to sign." So I signed it. I said to Beth, or whatever her name was, "I wish I had written this one too."
There you
David
go.
Mann.
Yeah.
So then
That's so cool.
I get to sign everything, just like Marcel Duchamp.
Now,
I'll sign
see,
everything.
you had fun. It sounds like to me you had a blast, and that's what it takes.
Yeah.
You really have to have fun with what
Yeah.
you're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's how you reach your audience. Exactly what this show is about is the many ways to reach your audience. I can't tell you how, I'm so thrilled that you did that yesterday.
Yeah.
You really don't.
Can I tell you something else I did to reach an audience that is off topic, but I'll make it really quick.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, as a self-publisher, something I never did before as a conventional publisher. I always put a manuscript out to a circle of readers of like 8, 9, 10, 12 readers early in the process to get feedback, critical feedback. I have my selected trusted readers and so forth. Great.
Yeah.
For this book, I put it out I said, let's get 2 dozen, let's get 3 dozen, let's get 4 dozen people to read this book.
Wow.
And I put it out and I put it out to my own personal mailing list and said, "Listen, anybody want this? I'll give you a copy of the ebook, pre-release, months ahead of time. My only request is leave a review on Amazon if you like the book when it comes out.
Right, and we
and also tell me your favorite quotes, because I'm going to use the quotes to promote the book." We ended up with almost 200 people.
Oh,
Wow.
You know what that does for you on Amazon when you do that? Wow.
Yes, I do know. And we had people who were telling their sisters and their brothers and their mothers and their kids, and it became like this whole online community around our book months before it had even come out. And I think if I had one piece of advice for somebody who's going to self-publish, it would be that: cultivate a community of readerships, not just people who read it, but a whole community around your book. Get a conversation started before the book comes out.
I'm going to
give it away.
I'm going to give you a suggestion as well, because you say you have a lot of culinary, ideas in your book. We had a
Yes.
guy on the show who wrote a book. It was his version of 50 Shades of Grey, written from a man's perspective. He didn't use his real name. You never saw him. He never did visual interviews. It was always through the radio because he didn't want people to know who he was. Because he does have his own television show and radio and everything. But anyway, so what he did, he would go on dating sites. And he was posting his book on dating sites with an anonymous person. And he was selling books through these dating sites. You could go to these cooking channels or these cooking sites or blogs or whatever. And, you know, if there are ways you could probably, if you have different ways of marketing, you could think of all the creative things possible. And that's one.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's very cool.
Well, it doesn't sound like you need the extra help, but that's a good way to
doesn't
go.
sound like you need any.
Well, you know, the big question for me was I have a full-time gig. I write books. I don't have time to put in all my time like a real entrepreneur would want to do. So we had to really pick and choose, both my co-author and me. My co-author is an executive chef at a country club, at one of the most prestigious country clubs in the nation, in Houston's River Oaks Country Club. It doesn't get more hoity-toity than that. So he doesn't have any time. I don't have any time. We had to figure out what targeted activities will we put our energy into, and what are all the things we're going to just leave on the table, because we can't do everything. So, you know, developing that group of readers was one thing. Doing podcasts and radio shows was one thing. We did a handful of things that we thought would be effective, and we left a lot more on the table. Couldn't do everything.
It's interesting, too, because another thing, we were talking about the bookmarks and how effective they are. We deal with, and I know you know this person, Jackie Lappin, who is a
yes.
Yeah, and Jackie gives us authors all the time to interview.
Yes,
and one of the things I was talking to Jackie is the misconception with a lot of authors is that if you go on a radio show, you're immediately going to sell tons of books from that show. And the reality of it is that's not true. But what it does do is familiarize people with your name.
Right.
And so later on, if they're reading an article about you or they see the book somewhere, they'll think, oh, I heard that person. So it may not make immediate sales for you that day, but down the road, it makes people familiar with who you are. And that's the important part of these interviews, whether it's radio or television or newspapers.
Planting seeds.
Yeah, planting seeds, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, it is much more agricultural than mechanical.
I'm curious, when it comes to the self-publishing, how did you find that? Was it difficult or?
Well, first of all, it was just technically speaking, logistically, I didn't realize until I started looking into it what was available. I didn't know you could do hardcover POD. I didn't know you could actually. I really wanted to do a hardcover of this edition of this book.
Who did you go through for your hardcover?
I went through Ingram Spark.
Okay.
And it's out there POD. I mean, I thought I was going to have to print 20,000, 10,000 copies myself, hardcover, which I really didn't have the budget to do. And I also didn't want to deal with the logistics of warehousing and blah, 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 blah.
All right. I'm curious, how did you decide on Ingram? Because a lot of people don't understand the distribution point. They don't understand that Amazon doesn't distribute the same way that Ingram does. And your royalties are less through Ingram, but at the same time, they can get you into bigger stores like Barnes & Noble. So I'm just curious, how did you learn about that?
So I went through Ingram Spark exclusively to do a hardcover edition, which I sell in all the online outlets. And I honestly, we don't make a lot of money on those hardcovers. Right. I would say it was, to be honest, more of an ego thing. I wanted that thing out in hardcover. Right. I wanted the book to present itself to the world as a hardcover. It's kind of like if I were a director, I would want my film to come out in a theatrical release and not go straight to DVD.
Correct.
Right.
So
even if it's just 2 theaters, at least it got distributed.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And even if the royalty per copy we earn is actually far less for this $30 hardcover than it is for our $5.99 ebook.
Right.
We earn more on a $6 ebook than we do on a $29 hardcover. But that's fine with me.
And I always advise authors to do that. Even you can still go through Amazon and have your book on Amazon and on Kindle. But I still advise people to go to Ingram because you want that distribution so you can reach a broader audience.
And we will do a paperback edition in 6 months or so, and I'll probably do that through CreateSpace, and pop it out everywhere, or maybe I'll do it in both. We can decide that later. We did a Kindle version. We actually did the ebook version through Pronoun. I don't know if you know Pronoun, but they're very cool. And they did the ebook edition, spit that out through iBooks, through Kindle, through Kobo, through everything.
Mm-hmm.
Although Amazon wasn't really mattered to us. And same thing with the audio version. I did the audio book recording and engineering myself with a wonderful studio that's in my town. I know the guy, and we gave the files to an outfit called Authors Republic, and they did the whole distribution from there. They got it out to all the audiobook outlets, and I found it flawless and just beautifully easy.
Yeah, my mind went blank right now, but I was trying to think of another one, something to digital. They're fairly new too, and they only charge 10% commission. And
I heard about that. Yes.
Yeah, and they get it on all the ebook outlets.
Yeah.
I forgot what it's called. Something to digital.
Yeah, I have that in my notes somewhere.
Yeah.
As
so
well.
At home, I have this board. I have all these things written down on. So when my next book comes out, I'm going to be ready. I'm just like everyone else.
To answer your question, I found it easy. I found the whole thing phenomenally and surprisingly and deliciously easy. The whole thing of reporting, of sales reporting, is just happening now, and I'm finding, they vary in the efficacy of the reporting process, but we'll see how that goes.
Well, since you're promoting this yourself, another thing you can do is I went on Facebook and I signed up for all these book clubs. So when my next book comes out, I'll have a book automatically. I'm already a member, because some of these book clubs on your Facebook or some of these outlets, you have to apply to be a part of that book club.
Yeah.
It's easy for me because I have a radio show, and there are authors who will want to be on. So the thing is but if you can go on there and tell them that you have all your background, you'll be accepted to all these book clubs, and then you can go and submit your book for reading, and then people are going to buy it because they want to talk about it at the book club. Right. And we're not talking about just like 20 or 30 people. Some of these book clubs are fairly large, like anywhere from 200 to 15,000. I mean, literally. Yeah. So, and I went all over the world, by the way. I didn't just look for clubs here in the U.S. I actually have an author I'm going to be interviewing on the radio from Australia who I found through a book club next month.
Huh. Yeah. Wow.
So
fascinating.
That's the power of those book clubs too.
That is
to me. That
great to
if
know.
you want to get it out there on a worldwide basis, you need to go to these book clubs and just become a member, and that'll really give you a worldwide audience.
Fantastic. Hang on while I scribble down and steal that idea. Okay, great.
We're giving it to you.
Well, I'm going to give you another idea for your next book. When it comes out, consider it a birth. If your wife was giving birth, you would take at least 3 days off from work. So you need to take 3 days off and go promote that book.
Listen, I hate to do this to everybody, but we're out of time. So we're down to the last minute of the show. I know.
Yes.
So, John, where can we learn more about your work?
Very simple. It's my name online. It's www.johndavidmann.com.
Okay. And I would like to thank our guest, John David Mann, along with our panelist, Dr. Carmen Smith, and my co-host, Janet Corsi. And you can find the archive of this show on aspectsofwriting.com once it's aired. In addition, it will be on youtube.com, so you can go to youtube.com/user/aspectsofwriting, and you'll be able to view it there. And I always suggest to people just go to aspectsofwriting.com because all the links are listed on our website. But just so you know, there's links to iHeartRadio there, iTunes, Roku TV, AMFM247.com, which is the company that markets our show. And then we're on 14 terrestrial stations. So just go to aspectsofwriting.com, and in the middle of the page to the right, you'll see terrestrial stations, and below that are the links to iHeart and all of those. So until next week, this is your host, James Kelly, reminding you, if you can dream it, you can write it. Thank you so much, John, Carmen, and Jan.
Thank you.
Fabulous.
My pleasure. Thank you.